Thank you for joining us. I'm Richard Curran. On behalf of the Smithsonian Folklife Festival at the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, I want to welcome you all to Beyond the Mall 2021, Making Matters. We look forward to connecting with you on our digital platforms as master artisans, cooks, sculptors, and musicians from as far away as Armenia and Fiji, Peru and Cuba, right here in Washington, D.C., welcome us into their kitchens and studios to share stories and skills. Together, we'll learn about Zapotec textile dyeing, Senegalese metalsmithing, Korean home cooking, and much, much more. This weekend is a future-facing reflection of the festival's legacy, making community no matter the circumstance, no matter the time. As we have every year since 1967, we offer sincere thanks to all of those who open their creative lives to us to share with us. And we hope that you take inspiration from their stories and find collective care, particularly this year, in the sharing. Thank you.
Hello. Welcome to Placemaking, Collective Care, and Culture, part of Beyond the Mall Making Matters, the 2021 Smithsonian Folklife Festival's weekend of digital programming. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're offering live, real-time captioning and American Sign Language interpretation during today's live program. To view the simulcast that includes these services, please use the link provided in the comments section. If you're viewing this program after the live broadcast, please note that it will also be made available on our website with closed captioning. My name is Hallie Buttman, and I'm Director of Special Projects here at the Smithsonian Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage. One of those special projects involves leading our cultural sustainability program, which enables the center to engage in long-term projects to support communities in their efforts to sustain their cultural practices. Over the past several years, we've had the opportunity to participate in a wide range of cultural sustainability projects in Armenia as part of the My Armenia Cultural Heritage Tourism Program, which is funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development and implemented by the Smithsonian Institution. We're excited to kick off a new cultural sustainability project starting soon in Tunisia. Today, we've invited local partners from both Armenia and Tunisia for a conversation about the role that curators and cultural entrepreneurs can have in creating vibrant communities. Over the last several months, the four of us who you'll meet today have been discussing the role of collective care in our work, especially in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. We asked each other the question, could our need for collective care be tied to the places that we live and love? Today, we invite you to join the conversation, and we hope it sparks ideas for ways to draw on cultural heritage to build a sense of place and community. We'll be taking your comments in the live chat, so please participate. We'd love to hear from you. We'll take the time to talk through as many of your questions as we can. This program and the Center's cultural sustainability work is supported by Ferring Pharmaceuticals. I want to say a special thanks also to the USAID Armenia team for their partnership and years of support for the My Armenia program. If you don't know the festival, I encourage you to check out festival.si.edu to learn about our programs, education resources, and more. And now I'd like to welcome our guests, Nairi Khatchadourian, Mark Gonzales, and Soraya Hosni. Hi, everybody. Part of today's conversation is deeply personal. We'll be delving into the ways in which our experiences shape the work we do in the world. So rather than reading out their bios, we're going to drop them in the chat, and Nairi, Mark, and Soraya will each share their own story with all of us. So before we get started, we thought it might be helpful to define placemaking, which is in the title of our event, since we're going to be using the term a lot in our conversation today. Placemaking, as defined by the Project for Public Spaces, is both an idea and a hands-on approach for improving a neighborhood, city, or a region. It inspires people to collectively reimagine and reinvent spaces. It's a collaborative, community-based approach that builds on local assets, inspiration, and potential, and results in spaces that contribute to people's health, happiness, and well-being. To start off our conversation today, I thought we'd all journey to the new Medina in Sousse, Tunisia, which is on the Mediterranean coast of the country. Mark and Soraya co-founded the new Medina. Soraya, can you introduce us to the new Medina? I know in addition to being an impactful cultural center, it carries deep personal meaning for both you and Mark. So please paint the picture for us.
Yes, of course. And what a beautiful conversation to be having today about collective care and what it means to create space as our communities and cities have been facing one of the biggest challenges of our generation. And as I often ask myself if we could find answers in ancient wisdom, often for myself the answer is yes. So let's talk about placemaking in the ancient city of Sousse, a place where my grandmother was born and my mother was born. And for me, placemaking is like making home, but for a whole neighborhood. And it's much more than an extended physical space. It's about personal stories, belonging versus exclusion, and the necessity of economic empowerment. It's also family healing and family ties. I grew up in Paris, in a popular neighborhood where everybody was very close to one another and everybody was very kind to one another. I also grew up thinking that I belonged in the public discourse, and I realized when I could make sense of what the public discourse was growing up, that I had to refer to myself only with one side of me, and that can only work for so long. Fortunately, being an anthropologist enabled me to have access to tools to healing cultural disconnection, which led me on this personal journey of healing an invisible wound, the feeling of not belonging to your own community. So one of the medicine available for that pain of exclusion is to remove yourself from the harm and to return to the place we learn to disregard, to find a new sense of self and to create a new story. That's what the new Medina is for me. It's that new story with the place, with belonging, with my family, and with my origins. So we have chosen to settle in the ancestral land of my maternal grandmother in Tunisia. And while there are things to be grateful for and others to complain about, like a very good Parisian that I am, we know how to complain, belonging isn't one of them. Not for me and not for my children. And it's no longer an issue. And that is where personal generational healing occurs. I always loved wandering the street of the Medina and feeling a sense of wonder and comfort behind these ancestral walls. That is where we decided to invest in businesses, restoration of buildings and community, especially for children and families of the neighborhood. But that wasn't the only reason, the personal reason. And we can talk about that more when we speak about the intergenerational method that we use in our work. I've always considered myself an applied anthropologist. I don't find enough value for myself in just studying communities. I want to help transform communities. So for this community, my community in Sousse, it's no different. And we started with building tools to conducting neighborhood-wide surveys to identify the strengths and the weaknesses of the neighborhood. And that's how we started building our programming that we'll describe later a little bit more.
Thank you. And you've been building the new Medina in partnership with Mark. So right. Mark, you're not originally from Tunisia, but you've spoken about the work with Soraya and your family and the new Medina beautifully as a means of a way of seeking belonging and place. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and your own dreams for the new Medina as it relates to your own personal experience?
Yeah, so thank you, Holly. I think the question of why would a person whose grandparents were from Mexico and great-grandparents from France, and he was born in Alaska in the 1970s, have any issue with belonging, identity, or where I'm supposed to fit in the world? Much less when you meet a French Parisian, then you have children who speak 4 languages by the time they're 3. Why is belonging an issue? You know, to be a little bit more kind of macro, if you sit with John Powell, the brilliant elder who really spearheads the Othering and Belonging Institute, both out of originally California and now Europe, he's one of the first people who point out that increasingly one of the fastest growing demographics in any country in the world is mixed identity families. And my mixed identity may be mixed passport status, or it may be across cultures. And then I think those of us who've worked in identity development or the cultural world realize actually there's no such thing as a single culture, you know, that we all carry multiple worlds within us. But the reality is we're often, when we enter a space, whether that space is a society or it's a country or it's a profession, you're told to pick one. What is your one passport? What is your one identity? You can be multi-language, but you're only allowed to have like one to speak in a place. Oh no, this is where the academics gather, the tech people gather over there. No, the artists gather over there. And we realize what that does is it really like fragments and fractures the many gifts and talents people have. And so when Soraya and I had our first daughter, we were really looking at how do we actually create an environment where she can celebrate all parts of her as a person who has a place that the world calls heritage and ancestral land, but we're like, but we go there. How is that ancestral land if it's active in our lives? You know, and we're like, oh, okay, no, but if we go there, now you're no longer in California, or you're no longer part of your community in the South Pacific, or, oh, you're going there to do innovation work, so you can't do culture work. Oh, you do culture work, you can't do foodie work. And we're like, nah, screw that. We're throwing that idea out the window. We want to create a base camp to explore all parts of us and to invite people who are also looking to explore all those parts to have that same journey together, to move belonging from a personal question to a collective question around global belonging. And as we know, when you want to answer a question that's going to take a while, then it's important to create a space and an environment that can house you and take care of all parts of you as you do that journey. And all parts of you mean children. Okay, I need to go, but I also need to bring my loved ones and my little ones. Otherwise, it's kind of like this classic hero's journey of an individual on a mountaintop. And it's like, come back. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, that was great for you. Bravo. Like, welcome to the rest of us. And it's like, no, we all want to go. And then it's like, well, the foodies in our lives, because we love to eat, you know, or the amazing creatives in our lives, you know, they're like, hey, we want to come. or the startup and the innovation in the tech world people who are like, man, we love the ways you guys like envision the future. Can we come as well? Because we love the ancient and we recognize the ancient has wisdom and medicine and brilliance and solutions to some of our modern problems that we've left out of. Can we come and experience it too? And can you help us curate a gateway, you know, so that the ancient and the future are no longer siloed, but actually converge, you know? And we always say, you know, we are the pivot point between all that ever was and all that ever could be. You know? And so that is how we began the journey.
I love that. Thank you so much, Mark and Soraya. As you saw in the chat, there was a good question about whether or not folks can visit the new Medina. And we've been talking about ideas and dreams of what it is, but it actually is a physical space. It's actually a network of spaces, and it's within the UNESCO World Heritage Site. We're going to get into a little bit more about the programming, but before we do that, I want to pass it over to Nairi for Nairi to share her journey with us. Nairi, some of your background is, I was struck by some similarities with Soraya. As a French Armenian, can you share a little bit about your journey and how your personal experience is connected to the work that you're doing as a curator in Armenia?
So I come from a mother who's a musician, Armenian from Iran, who moved to Paris to study music, and a father who's a consultant from Marseille, but who moved to Paris for work, and who started researching independently on Armenian cultural heritage. So I have this artistic really environment where I grew up, and it really shaped who I am. And beside the Armenian culture that was transmitted to me, I also was part of the multicultural Parisian and French art scene. So this artistic platform where I was really secured my path towards going to be a curator, working with different artists. And another thing that really shaped who I am is that the multidisciplinary approach that my father and mother had when conceiving different projects during my childhood, you know, having artists, scholars, you know, different practitioners being together to work on different projects, really, you know, shaped my way of thinking and my way of practicing. So when I moved from Paris to Armenia 6 years ago, it was natural that, of course, I'll be, first of all, working in a music museum. And one of the important thoughts that Soraya said about ancient wisdom is really something that I carry along as well. And to me, folklore is really like a source of wisdom, and it's something that has to be passed on from one generation to another, either orally or through different, you know, activities and projects. And one of the project that I started doing right off when I arrived was to conceive a lullaby singing workshop, because I really think that the bonds that are created between parents, between generations, and you know, parents and children, is something crucial in the healthy development of a human being. And we can see a photo from one of those workshops at the Komitas Museum, where I started my career as a curator in Armenia. And basically, we were just collectively singing lullabies, you know, during daytime with parents and kids together, or parents to be, or couples, whoever wanted to sing. We were different folk lullabies from the Armenian different, you know, regions with different dialects, and singing collectively. And that was really something that started my journey towards, you know, collective care, and how in Armenia we can create spaces where we secure that collective care, where we share that collective care. And when I started working independently with AHA Collective, which is like an artist collective in Armenia, conceiving different art projects, I collaborated with Mikhail Voskanyan, who's a fantastic musician and composer, born in Yerevan in Armenia, who was also a participant of the Folklife Festival in 2018 or 19, Hali, I
2018, 3 years ago. Yeah.
We collaborated together because during the pandemic, although like all the concert halls were closed and performances were not happening live, the artists didn't stop creating and didn't stop sharing, love and care towards their communities. And one of the projects that Mikhail started was composing a new lullaby. And sometimes we have this kind of stereotype to say lullabies are only sung by women, grandmothers or mothers, but it's not the case. And Mikhail, as a male musician, he composed a beautiful lullaby. And to me, it was important to, try to build a bridge between diaspora Armenians and local Armenians from Armenia. And we built a partnership between a visual artist from Paris, Adam Rasho, and Mikhail Voskanyan to create an animation of the lullaby, which was shared widely on the social networks, and which really shared a spirit of collective care during this really hard lockdown period that the world experienced. Maybe we could have fragments from that lullaby shared with you all.
Oh, every time I watch that and listen to it, I remember it was such a difficult time last year. And I would put that when I was going through something difficult, I would put that on and feel soothed. And it was so meditative also, of the mother dancing, with the child in her arms in a circle. It was really a beautiful project. So thinking about that sense of belonging that you were kind of creating and working with musicians and kind of bringing folks together, I'm really struck by the intimacy of that. And I'm going to do something a little different and I'm going to ask Mark to zoom out. So from the close and intimate, like Nairi's talking about these, bringing people together, and parents and children, and working together in this lullaby, like very intimate space. Can you zoom out for us and kind of talk to us about the bigger picture of, how do you kind of draw on your knowledge and experience in futurism and systems to create programming that can be that intimate? How do you connect those pieces?
That's a really good question. I think one of the things that I would share is that, so I'm 45, and in 20 to 25 years of work across innovation, education, change-making, placemaking, you begin to realize there's a lot of individuals who are doing amazing work and doing the best they can. You start to de-antagonize folks, and you realize there's people trying their best across spheres of power, from local community into kind of global bodies and governing powers. And then you're like, if all this is happening, why aren't things moving? And you start to realize that maybe it's not about the intent, maybe it's about the design frameworks that we're sitting and working within. And so for us, and when we began really looking at the challenges or the pain points that people were speaking about within the Medina, in terms of there were abandoned buildings or buildings that were into decay, 20% of the country no longer lives within the country, it lives abroad. People are taking, whether they can, the visas to kind of high-tech positions in France and the UK, or the boats, to Italy, which we hear a lot about the stories across. And we're looking at all of that and we're saying, okay, but it's so beautiful here. What is missing? And one of the things we started to do is, in our question of what was missing, is we started to explore, well, what already existed? You know, so before we begin to build forward, let's actually take a time machine backwards. And we realized that the Medina, while it's translated often as old city, and we call it more appropriately the ancient city, the one we're in is 1,500 years old, the walls that surround it, that are still here. El Jem, you know, the Tunisian amphitheater, labeled Roman amphitheater, you know, is 2,000 years old in terms of the stairs and steps that are still there. We realized that actually the Medina itself is more than a city. It's a model of urban and social development. The walls, which people look as you go across kind of like Islamic civilization and cities, you realize that's the original borders of neighborhoods. You realize the sacred space, you know, which every community had in Islam, being in the masjid or the mosque, it has a specific area. And then you realize there's a residential area next to it. And then you realize there's a souk, and then the souk being the original economy and marketplace that is categorized into different places. Then there's an eating place. And then you realize the environment is actually filtered across. There's a natural integration of ecosystem. And people are like, well, where did the children go? The children go everywhere because it's their home, the entire neighborhood, the entire city. Where do the elders go? Well, the elders go everywhere because when you get married, you don't move out of the home. You build the home on top of the home or next to the home. And so you realize that you have multi-generational home with economy built into a model of urban development with architecture and tied into it. In the kind of mid-1900s, this image you see that model disrupted through the kind of import across the world of the US model of suburban development and suburban sprawl, which was the idea of like, I'll get my villa, my riad, my big home outside of the city and my own huge lawn. But then that means I've got to drive somewhere else to get to the grocery store. It means my elders now live far apart from me. It means my children can't naturally interact with children next to each other because the yards or the spacing of it is so far from one another. And all of these start to create a problem in terms of we see it as, oh, I don't have enough time to go visit my elders, or I don't have enough time to spend with my children because I'm commuting to work and back to work and then somewhere else for groceries. And we don't realize this is all tied to a core issue, which is a model of development that doesn't fit the cultural framework that a community is living within. And if you can go to the next slide. So what we began doing actually was envisioning what a regenerative model for the ancient city would look like, utilizing the old pillars of children's activity, integrated green space, souk, sacred space, intergenerational home, all of that around place-based enterprise, but making it relevant to the modern era and being like, oh, we're gonna actually start taking over multiple places based upon what the community has said they want. And we're actually going to work with them to create local enterprise to fill those abandoned spaces for the benefit of those who live here and those who love here. And so we started building out our culinary lab program, creating a maker's studio, having a headquarters, and now working into our kind of children's design studio and incubators for local economy and local futures. All of that, if you go to the next images, all of that, though, really centers around not this idea of beauty is something that I have to take a plane to, or beauty and prosperity and success is what happens when I leave my neighborhood, but all starting with what is beautiful and wondrous and abundant about the places we live that already naturally are. What are the things that we have here in our backyard, in our home, that you can't find anywhere else in the world? And we don't say that in opposition to another place, but to encourage every place to ask that. And then when you begin asking that, then you can actually start to build a future that centers the wonder that already is, and then looks at how do I then populate the things that are missing that we'd like to have. And so for us, this is how you create a new model and a regenerative model of development. One that centers local beauty, power, and place. One that allows us to fold in the multiple parts of us, you know, because again, many of us are multi, if you will, whether it's multi-identity, you know, multi-national, or just multiverse in terms of like all the parts of us that we carry within us. And then we say, okay, we're going to actually build an economy around that. And the last part real quick is we did recognize that a large part of our global community loved the idea, but also was like, but I want to come and I want to visit, you know, and I want to be a part of that. And so the first part we actually built was the Global Residency Center that was child inclusive, saying we want people to come visit with their loved one and their children, if they choose. Some people are like, nah, I need to leave them behind. I've been locked up with them in a room for COVID for the last year. Then going back into, okay, no, come, but don't come for a day and don't come for 3 days, come for a week, come to a month, come to explore local talent and share your talent and then co-create together. Because if you want to be a part of a hotel that isolates you from local, there's plenty of hotels. That's the model of tourism that was the last 40 years. And we're saying, no, the new model we want to build actually embeds you within the local and creates a space for you to be excited and explore it.
Thanks, Mark. I love the graphics. I mean, personally, my background is in urban planning, my education. So seeing that kind of description of the space and what happens in spaces that are more conducive to community building versus some that are like the suburban development model that's so much more isolating for people. When I'm thinking about space, I want to pass it back to Nairi for a moment, because I invited Nairi to join us. She doesn't have an actual space like the new Medina, but one of the things that I think Nairi is really doing that is so much in line with the concept that you've been talking about is almost this placemaking on a micro level. And Nairi did a project last year related to really kind of coming back to this idea of belonging that I'd really love for her to talk about. So as during the pandemic last year and waves of the pandemic happening, there was a renewed and devastating conflict that broke out between Armenia and Azerbaijan in Nagorno-Karabakh, which is a long disputed territory between those nations. So with thousands of Armenians fighting and dying on the front lines, there was this real need for collective care back in Yerevan. The feeling was acute. And so Nairi put together with artists there a poster exhibition with messages of well-being and peace, and worked in different spaces in Armenia. And so Nairi, can you talk to us about that and the concepts that you adopted in that exhibition and how you kind of brought those pieces to different spaces around the country?
Yeah, I think placemaking is both the process of creating quality places in a given location, in a site, just like the wonderful new Medina of Soraya and Mark, but it's also about creating quality spaces where you have shared emotion, shared and collective care. So it's also about the emotional part and the social and human part. And through the different exhibitions that we did together with my colleague Navarti Erkanyan, we really wanted to create those types of spaces. And really, during times of war, art is the strongest vehicle of hope. And during the war in Nagorno-Karabakh, with the suggestion of the Golden Apricot Film Festival in Armenia, we decided to gather the community around peace. And although we were in war, and we invited more than 27 artists, Armenian artists from different places, Armenia, Nagorno-Karabakh, and the diaspora, to create posters about and contemplate on the notion of peace. So different people transmitted different messages. Some of them transmitted message of fragility. We can maybe see, in this photo on the left part, the graphic artist Bahram Muradian from Paris, who created this diptych where we see different geometrical forms being in balance together, but without one piece, there will be imbalance. So the state of order and balance and peace is really about how collectively we build that. So this was one of the posters that was really shared and appreciated. But there were numerous posters exhibited. Here we see how cultural heritage and arts is important and powerful in peace building. And on the left, we see one of the oldest Armenian stones, so menhirs. And on the right, we see how powerful a pen can be. So language can be. And we had other posters for peace. So this was exhibited in Yerevan for 1 week. And it was also widely shared online. And in spring, approximately 2 months ago, we decided to continue doing collective exhibitions of posters, and this time gather around a public space. So we collaborated with the Lovers Park in the central of Yerevan, and we did an outdoor poster exhibition, which we entitled Respring. So to again give hope, so transmit hope, of course, and see how we can collectively secure that rebirth and respring. And beside Yerevan, we also thought that those posters could travel in the regions of Armenia. And we did a partnership with a very unique model of rural development in Armenia, which is led by the QUAF Foundation, Children of Armenia Foundation. And we exhibited the posters about peace in their smart center in the region of Lori, which is in the northern part of Armenia. And this time we wanted to use the double-sided kind of glass facade of this beautiful building. And we exhibited the posters about peace in this region, double-sided, so inside and outside, to share that, you know, peace is really about something that you find within yourself, but also outside, with nature, with the local communities. Hattie, you're muted.
Thanks for helping out. After all this time, they've still got to remember that. So one of the things I was really struck by in seeing the poster exhibition is also, and I think this is something that I've noticed a lot in Armenia and something that I'm learning a lot about Marcus Soraya's work in Tunisia as well, is that relationship of family and how much parents and children are taking things in together. There was a photo for our event of a family with a small child looking at the posters and sharing in that experience together. And I think that, you know, we're in a space in the US right now as well of thinking about what's not working in education and in childcare. And so something Soraya, I'd really love for you to speak to some of the programming that you're doing at the New Medina that's intergenerational and really takes a different look at the child and care of the child in relationship to the family. So can you talk about that a bit?
Yes, absolutely. So when we started designing our program, we didn't just came up with the ideas. As an anthropologist, I came with the tools to design and assess the needs of the community and the strength and the weaknesses of the community. Most strength were within the community and within human interactions, like the biggest thing people shared was that the solidarity between neighbors was the highest strength that they had. But in terms of weaknesses, it was services and opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so we started looking at what are those services that are missing? What are these opportunities that are missing? And, you know, I grew up again in Paris, where theater and art and cinema from all over the world and contact with people from all over the world is the norm. This is a very touristic place, usually when the world is allowed to travel. So the children are exposed to others, but not really on a qualitative level. Like tourists pass by the shops, but they don't really interact with the population. They don't share about their culture with the local children. So they don't know about much of the world outside of what they see on screens. So, assessing that was very important, and then designing programming that answered all these needs, like single mothers, isolated elders, children that didn't have a place to go learn how to do art or to be exposed again to recipes from the world. And so this intergenerational knowledge transmission is at the core of the work that I do across indigenous communities all over the world, because I believe that this is how we reactivate memory for elders and for children. But when an elder shares a story to a child, it's different than if you record the story on a microphone without the child that they are teaching it to. And the children learn the story, and the elders share the story with the more heart. And the memory it's magic. You see it when you have communities sharing, and I'm sure Nairi lived that when they did the Lullaby project as well. It's like it is a magic when there's different generation in the room trying to really work something that is from their heritage, or solve a problem or answer a question together. So we did design the programming based for children, but with the intergenerational mindset. So parents are welcome. And it's the same for the global residency. When you're an artist and you want to come for a residency, in most places, you have to leave your children behind or your partner behind. And that's okay if that's what you need. But if there is no other alternative, then we have to create that alternative. That's the role we want to take as cultural entrepreneurs. That's the role that we see as being collective care. We want to participate in the art making of the artist by providing the environment they need and the community they can share it with. If we could share the picture of El Cid work, diaspora has a very important role in playing in this. So it's intergenerational, but also multidimensional and multi-border work. Like when you bring world-class artists in a neighborhood where they wouldn't be exposed to it otherwise, if we haven't created this platform to invite those artists. Now children have learned about El Cid, which is a world-renowned Tunisian artist. They've learned about him. They Googled him. They are proud to take pictures in front of the art piece, and they protect the art piece. They understood what art is just by being exposed to a new form of interaction with their neighborhood. And we do the same with musicians. Quetzal Flores, that has worked with the Smithsonian for many projects, and they have artifacts at the Museum of Folk Life as well. They came to Tunisia and they sang son jarocho music and sang in Spanish, and they interacted with Sufi band here in Sousse. So there was a melting pot and an opening of what is possible in the world of creativity, what is possible in the world of entrepreneurship as well, for the children and for the families here.
Thanks, Soraya. As you're talking, I was thinking, and some of the questions we've had in the chat are coming around sustainability and, how we live together in the future, which is another question that we've been talking a lot about. And I'm curious, so thinking about the new Medina is a model of how we live together and sustainable living. And there's themes of this that are kind of coming up around that idea of collective care and family and home. And I want to, Nairi, I want to ask you to talk about a project that you recently did that touches more on the environmental side of things with the Inside Out project, because I think that's another dimension to this that we're always thinking about, is the relationship of place and the environment and the challenges that we are all facing with climate change and that sort of thing. So can you share that project with us, please?
So more than a year ago, so before the pandemic started, we were working with the artist Anushkasian on one of her last installation work. And I think that contemporary artists are really the thinkers who can reflect upon the contemporary issues and raise awareness in a different manner than media and, journalists and others, because they help us think, help us find opportunities and new solutions. And I can't say like right before or during, like right at the beginning, but the artist started working on a massive installation using one of the objects that we find, the object that we find the most in the world, sewer pipes. And those are ceramic sewer pipes. So those are not real objects, like real pipes, but they were molded and made with clay. And she made a massive installation that we first installed outdoor in a clay mine near Yerevan. And she reflected upon of course, the environmental crisis we are living, but also the lockdown experience that the world experienced by flipping the inside of the pipes outside and the outside, environment inside. And of course, she used a very surrealist approach by using the clouds. And this outside installation show it to the community and the larger public. So we collaborated with the Kafesyan Center for the Arts in Yerevan to have it installed really in a museum setting, because the outdoor installation was only documented by photographer Nelly Gevorkian, and no one else saw it. So we really wanted to show how the artist reflected upon the experience that we had on a global level. So we collaborated with the Museum of Kafesyan Center for the Arts and did this exhibition inside. But what happened is that we brought the clay soil from the outside in, and we also had a video showing the moving skies. So we also brought the skies inside. So it was really about, understanding that borders are really mutable and change, just like we saw during the pandemic. The outside air was not safe for people, so we were all closed inside our homes. I really think that those types of artistic projects really build a stronger community, because this exhibition was not only viewed by the artistic community, but a really larger public in Armenia that is not really familiar with contemporary art. So we really pushed the boundaries and try to share those questions and those topics to like a larger public.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I think, as our audience can probably tell, there's a lot of different threads of relationship, and I wish we had 2 hours to kind of get into all of the nitty gritty and kind of the relationship between things here. But what I'm seeing, there's a lot of, in the work and the approach to the work that you all are doing in your spaces, in our conversations, it always kept coming back to building a sense of belonging, linking these, I was very struck by the linking of diaspora with homeland and that idea, and connecting the ancient and where we are and thinking about the future. And all of it kind of also in this real sense of care and well-being with the work. And one of the questions that I saw come through from the audience is about, replicating models and things like that. And with the new Medina model, wondering what are the possibilities of creating that in a vision for replicating that work in other locations. Mark or Soraya, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so the new Medina is more than a physical space. As people are beginning to allude to, it is a vision or a blueprint for revitalizing place without losing who you are or abandoning the future, and saying that we can carry all of it within us and carry it forward. As part of that vision, though, it's actually more than a single space. There is a network of spaces within the Medina that has a global, that has a governance model of how they interact with one another. And then there is a growing regional network that we're building of additional spaces to look at how to transform the region. And then we've had inquiries from other places, from Morocco, Egypt, Turkey, and Spain, of communities, cities, neighborhoods that are asking if they can join the model. And that's the ultimate vision, which is looking at what is a global governance and shared futures model that actually allows a network of such spaces to move together to build a shared future collaboratively, especially because we know cities and neighborhoods are increasingly taking on powers that used to be held only by federal governments or nation states. Cities and neighborhoods are negotiating their own trade agreements and their own internal governing protocols. And so we're leaning into that place and saying, hey, how can we actually claim and activate that power from a sense of agency and say, we want to do this together? We know already there's the Mediterranean League of Cities, there's the National League of Cities, there's the Global Parliament of Mayors, the US Mayors Network. We already have these networks starting to grow of traditional decision-making bodies. Let's do the same from an enterprise and a social standpoint as well.
Going in another direction, I want to take this question from the audience because I think this is a really good one that I'm myself curious about as a person who doesn't have children. We have been talking about family in a little bit of a conventional way here in the intergenerational model. So can you speak to how your work relates to people who do not have children or partners and how you would acknowledge or integrate their varied gifts and presence? Really good question.
So that's actually a really good question, because the Medina is historically the safe space for everyone and every identity and every form of living human has always felt welcome in the Medina. And that's kind of like the untold rule of this place, and which is why you have different communities that could be marginalized otherwise in other environments that are in the safe space in the Medina. Even if maybe outside the Medina, that's not how people react, but as soon as you enter through the walls, everyone is welcome. And that's like the sentiment that is still present today. We're living in the Bay Area for quite a while. We also say chosen family. There is not one definition of family, you know, there's multiple, and community is one definition of family. We say it's child inclusive because for people with children, they wouldn't feel welcome otherwise if it wasn't stated. And so it's for everyone to interact with everyone. There is no seclusion in how we define family. It's for us, family as the safe group.
Yeah, and it's one aspect of the work that you take on and that you're considering in that space. That makes sense. That it's really about building community more broadly, that there is that message of that there's a place for everyone within that, and for people to be able to feel that and to not be so isolated. And so we only have a few minutes left in the session. And so what I really would love to hear from each of you, because this last year, you know, now we're kind of emerging from this pandemic in some places, not as much in others, but, you know, I know that it's been really challenging and awful around the world. And so I want to ask each of you to just share a moment of joy from your work, something that's happened that's been really positive through that time. Whoever wants to start.
Before that, could I change the standard of conversation being moderated by Hallie and ask to my
we have a takeover. Yes, go for it, Nairi Jan, go for it.
I am just so in awe and inspired by the model of the new Medina. And I wanted to know, because we didn't touch that much upon the question of the built heritage. And since the new Medina is really in a cultural heritage site, I wanted to know, like, what's the relationship of the community with that site, with the heritage? And are there any types of preservation or any type of activity led with the site, with the cultural heritage site?
So unfortunately, most people before we started didn't see what was possible with the old buildings. And so a lot of them were abandoned or flipped to look like more modern. And by showing and by restoring the buildings with some modern amenities, like adding showers to the rooms and private bathrooms, and just like adding some of the modern comfort that some people would look like, or that we also seek to have, it showed another way of interacting with the heritage and how you could preserve it. And so that's a tendency across Tunisia and other ancient cities. But in Sousse, it wasn't really like the norm. And there's still a lot of work to be done in that regards.
What I would add in terms of how people reacted to the heritage, I think it's something similar you see across the world. Which is you naturally tend to start to devalue the things around every day on one level. I think though there's an additional level that I think is the largest blind spot or gap of kind of the heritage development or heritage preservation space, which is nations dedicate large envelopes, not only internally, but to the global sphere, if you will, for heritage preservation, especially of architectural sites. But what you actually begin to see is it's for the preservation of the architectural site, not for the people within that neighborhood. And so it starts to create an antagonistic relationship between the site and the people who live there, because they see the amount of money going to repaint, to build, etc., when they are like, I don't have enough resources for what I need to better or improve my life. And it starts to create an unhealthy dynamic. And so for us, that's been one of the interventions we've been trying to make to global bodies, which is for them to start folding into people-based support development incubators for local economy, not just taking what we would call a museum model of preservation of let's preserve the physical site so the global world can come visit it, saying place is meant to be alive and active and organic. And so let's invest in it as such, and then we'll find people will take care of it from everywhere.
Thank you, Mark. That really brings it back to, talking about cultural sustainability and the work that we're doing together. Is it's not just, the places that the built heritage is important, but what is it without the people? And I think at the center, that's really what we focus on at Folklife. It's all about intangible cultural heritage. It's about those traditions that, that what takes place there. And I think that's what all three of you are cultivating so beautifully in your work. I hate to say it, but this hour has flown and we've got to wrap it up. So I want to say thank you so much to each of you, Nairi, Soraya, and Mark, for your insights and for your partnership. I'm so grateful to work with you. I'm continually inspired by each of you, and I'm so glad we had the opportunity to share a little bit about your experiences with the Folklife Festival audience. I want to thank all of you at home for watching, listening, and commenting. And I want to close by offering gratitude to the amazing team at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival, to the director, Sabrina Lynn Motley, for encouraging our participation.
Thank you.
And to those behind the scenes, Sarah Rothman, Lisa Huff, Diane Nutting, Alex Taggart, Jenny Maycock, Maya Cassidy, Cecilia Halley, Sloan Keller, Claudia Ferranda. I hope I didn't miss people for their production, promotion, and administrative efforts in support of this program. You can follow the Smithsonian Folklife page here on Facebook to get notifications about future events, and find us also on Instagram and YouTube. Visit our website and come back here for our next program. We've got a lot going on this weekend. The Beyond the Mall Making Matters Digital Festival continues tomorrow, June 27th, with more exciting programs, including story circles on Senegalese metalsmithing, DC music, and Korean ginseng chicken soup. See the full festival schedule on our website at festival.si.edu, and make sure to also check out our fabulous festival marketplace. We're offering 20% off through the end of June. We hope to see you back here soon. And if you've missed any of our programs and want to see them again, good news, you'll be able to view them on our website anytime. So please watch and share. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.